So that's what chapter 3's focuses. And then chapter 3 goes into classes and objects and constructors. Probably what you might have learned in 1 week of C# object-oriented programming in your first semester is what chapter number 3 will tell you about how you will do that in Java. And the functions, the methods, value returning, non-value returning, parameter passing, that stuff will also be covered in this chapter. I don't know how sharp your skills are when it comes to modularization of the code, but that will be our focus for the day. So even if you have forgotten about some of that stuff, you will have a chance to review some of those topics today. Does anybody has any questions before we do the review of the last week's chapters?
I don't think so.
So last week, we start to look into Java as a programming language. So what kind of programming language is Java?
Object-oriented.
Object-oriented, okay. So when it comes to an object-oriented programming language, how does it perceives as compared to what is the other kind of language, other kind of programming besides object-oriented? So we have object-oriented, and what's the older approach of programming called?
Procedural programming.
Procedural-oriented, right. So when we talk about Java being an object-oriented programming language, what exactly do we mean by that?
Is it that it kind of organizes around data itself, like, or the objects that you create with the data instead of like the actual procedures, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it basically organizes itself around classes, which hold methods and data. And then you work with those classes using objects, which are variables of those class types, versus working with procedures, directly working with procedures. Yep, exactly. What is one of the biggest advantage of Java that added to its popularity?
The fact that it can be deployed on multiple different platforms without having to recompile.
Yep, it's platform independent in that way that you could deploy it on different platforms without having to recompile it. So you write your Java source code and you compile your Java source code. What is the end result? What kind of file is that that comes out of the compiler? Successfully compiled Java code is called what?
A jar file.
Jar is like a zip file. It stands for Java archived. It's like a zip file, but yeah, go ahead.
Bytecode?
Bytecode, exactly. So when a Java program goes through a compiler and it is error-free, has no syntax errors, then it produces a bytecode. What is the file extension of a Java source code?
.java.
Good. And what is the file extension of bytecode?
.class.
.class. Very good. Okay. Now your bytecode needs to run. Who do you give this bytecode so that it could be run?
Java interpreter.
Java interpreter, okay, and who invokes it? Who invokes the Java interpreter, the JIT?
JVM.
JVM, Java Virtual Machine, and that's basically the reason Java becomes transparent to the underlying operating system, because JVM takes care of everything for the Java. Okay, so now that we have the JVM, we have the JIT, just-in-time interpreter, that takes the Java code, executes it. It's an interpreter, works very different from a compiler. It takes chunks of code and runs it, and then takes another chunk of code and run it, and so on and so forth. Okay. When you create a Java program inside a Java project, what do you have to keep in mind in terms of naming the class and naming the file?
They have to be the same name.
Does it matter if there's a difference in case?
Yes.
So for example, your file could be lowercase and your actual class name can be, with an uppercase letter, like let's say employee with a lowercase e, the file name, and employee with an uppercase e in the class name. Is that okay?
No.
No, it's not. So it's case sensitive, and it requires both to match exactly, even in the case. So when you create a class, you give class name. So you type the word class followed by the name of the class. The word class, it comes in a different color than the word class name that you give. Why? Why does the word class is in a different color than the actual class name that you give?
Is it because it's identifying that it's in the system, like it's a data type? Well, it's not a data type, but it's recognized by the system as the class. I'm not explaining that really well. Sorry.
Let's give it a shot again. So the word class, the word main, the word public, sorry, not the word main, the word public, void, and class, they all appear in the same color. Why?
They're not methods, or
Why do they all appear in the same color? What is common about these three items on your screen? The public, void, class. I'm looking for a word very close to what Aiden
Are they
said.
all objects?
No, they're not objects. No.
Are they identifiers?
Identifiers? What do you mean by identifiers?
I'm not sure. I was just trying to read the book. And I saw that. I thought maybe that's what it was.
Let's see. Somebody else can try.
Keywords.
These are keywords or reserved words. And what are they? What is the definition of that? Anyone remembers that? The definition of reserved words or keywords. Words that have special meaning in a language. Okay. Every language has its own set of reserved words. How many types of errors are there?
3.
3. And what are they?
Syntax, logical, runtime.
Yep. So which error is caught by the compiler out of the 3?
Syntax.
Syntax, because compilers are created to look for the syntax, which is the grammar of a language, that every instruction in a language needs to follow a certain structure. If it doesn't follow that structure, the compiler will not compile. Logical errors, who catches them?
We do when we run the programs and it's not doing what we want it to.
Okay, and runtime error, who catches that?
Is it debugger?
Mm-hmm. The debugger, not the compiler, the interpreter. The interpreter will catch the runtime errors. Okay. How do you define a variable?
A reserved space in memory.
Okay. And do variables have to have data types? Is it required?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Data types are categorized into 2 categories. What are they? I gave you half of the answer. The 2 types.
Primitive.
Primitive and?
Non-primitive.
No. Primitive and let's see if somebody else remembers or could look up.
Is it primitive and user defined?
Mm-mm. Primitive and
Reference.
referenced. Yep. So all the class types are called referenced. All the non-class types are called primitive. Primitive data types usually can represent a single value. Single value. If you bring in another value, the previous value will be overwritten. And the data types for a variable will decide how much space to allocate. How many primitive data types are there? How many? Just a number. Give me just a number. Don't give me any names, just a number.
7.
7. Okay. Does anybody has a different answer?
I think there's 8.
8. 8 is the correct answer. We have, out of 8, how many data types are for numbers? Give me a number.
6.
6. The other 2 are for what? What are the other 2 types other than the 6 that are for numbers?
True, false, and string.
Let's talk
Um,
about one at a time. True, false. What is that data type called?
Boolean.
Boolean.
Boolean. String is not a primitive type. If you remember, string starts with an uppercase S. It's not a primitive type. It's a reference type. So who else besides Boolean?
Character.
Character, right? Okay. So we have Boolean and character to be the 2 non-number types, and the rest of the 6 are numbers. Out of the 6 types for numbers, how many are for decimal out of the 6? And what are they?
There's 2, float and double.
Yep. And for the 4 non-decimal numbers, what are the names of those data types?
Long, integer, short, and byte.
Okay. Who can store the largest value out of the four?
Wrong.
If I have a value of 30,000, which one of the four number types will be best suited to fit the value?
Short.
Short. Okay. What if the value is 33,000?
Integer.
Integer. Okay, cool. If the value is 5,
Byte.
byte. Do all integer and float and double types represent signed and unsigned numbers? Are signed and unsigned numbers supported by all 6 types? You guys understand the signed and unsigned numbers?
Not really. I don't
Yeah.
at least.
I don't either.
Signed numbers are numbers that can be negative and positive. Unsigned numbers are those that can only be 0 and up.
Okay.
Okay. So all 6 types, can they represent negative numbers?
Yes.
Okay. So they do support signed numbers. In some of the languages, they have further categorizations of integers. So for example, you may have a variable called int that could serve both negative and positive numbers. And then you may have a data type called uint. That means an unsigned int. That means it can only represent numbers 0 and above. What is the advantage of that? The advantage of that is, let's say integer is 4 bytes. And it can represent numbers from -2 billion to +2 billion. If you know for sure that you will not need any negative numbers and all your numbers will be 0 and up, you can declare the data type to be unsigned. So now the range of numbers your data type variable can support will now double, because now the same integer variable, because being unsigned, still gets 4 bytes, but now it can support numbers up to 4 billion. So some some languages will let you do that, signed and unsigned. Java doesn't have that differentiation. Okay. Now coming to character. Character, how many characters can you store at a time in a character variable?
1.
1, okay. Can you do arithmetic on character variables?
Yes,
Yes. Why?
because each character is assigned a number.
Which is, what do you call that number?
Man, I forget.
Anybody remembers?
Would that be Unicode?
No. No. ASCII. ASCII, ASCII code. String is not a primitive type. I already told you it's a reference type. In order for you to work with string, you declare them exactly like you would declare any other variable, because Java lets you treat that. When you first create a Java program, you need to add a main method to work with that program. Otherwise, your program will not run. The main is the entry point into your program. Main has a parentheses, which takes in a parameter. What is the data type of that parameter?
String?
Is it a variable?
It's an array.
It's an array. Okay. In Java, we use curly braces, squigglies, whatever you want to call it. Why? What's the purpose of those curly braces?
To make sure that the code contained within, to organize and make sure it's running exactly what you want it to within the curly braces, not anything else.
So what do you call that code that's in the curly braces?
The method.
It is not only method, it is also, if you remember in C#, you used it with if conditions, loops, right? The curly braces or switch case. So it can't be just by methods. There must be a more generic name for the set of curly braces code. The answer is block versus a single statement or instruction. It's a block code. Okay. Is indentation of any value in Java?
It helps us organize the code.
Yep, that's it. It has no value in Java other than that. I also told you about one programming language in which indentation is required. Otherwise, the code will not work. Does anybody remember that language from last week?
Is that RPG?
No.
No.
Python.
Was it JavaScript?
Python.
Oh, Python.
Because Python doesn't use this curly braces for block code. It works with indentations. Okay. In Java, we had a string class. When we start the program, we write the main method. String class belonged to which Java package?
.lang.
Yep. Does anybody remember any other Java packages that we went over last week?
Swing was one of them, right?
Swing is a package in which Java package?
Java X.
And lang is in which Java package?
Java.
Okay. Excuse me. Do you remember any other classes we learned last week, built-in Java classes besides string and what Christian wrote in the comments, J option pane?
Scanner.
Scanner. Yep. Did you use that in your homework?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, you had to. Okay. So when you create a scanner class, it comes from java.util package. It's a utility package. And scanner is a reference type. So when you create an object of scanner type, you write scanner, the name of the object, equals to, what do you write on the other side of equals? The first word.
Input.
New.
New. New. What is the significance of the word new?
It instantiates the scanner class.
It helps instantiate the scanner class object. And what exactly does the word instantiate means?
It creates an instance or an object, scanner object.
True, but what exactly does it mean in reality? Has like, have everybody heard the word instantiate before? Or is it the first time you're hearing the word instantiate?
It's the second time I'm hearing it from you, but it was the first time last week.
Okay, so I mean, like before today, you have heard of the word instantiate.
Yep.
Okay. Instantiate means to allocate memory for an object and fill that memory with one or more values. Okay. Instantiate means allocate memory for the object and fill that memory with one or more values. That's what instantiate means. The equivalent word that you would use for a variable would be initialize. But since variable is single value, it's initialized. Objects can be multi-valued, therefore they're instantiated. With the word new, they allocate memory. And how do they know what to fill in that memory? The word after new, you call a function that has the same name, or a method that has the same name as the name of the class. That method is called constructor. The constructor will provide with the filler values. That's the whole point of a constructor. And that right-hand side of the equation is what our focus will be for today. And you will see that today, how to do that stuff. But anyway, so the word new helps in instantiation. With the help of constructor, completes the process of instantiation, which is allocate the memory for the object and fill it with some initial values. Is everybody clear about that?
Yep.
Okay. There's no guarantee if you will remember that by next week or no, but at least you're clear for now. Right?
Right.
Right. Okay. What is inheritance?
You can use the data and properties of another class in a separate class by inheriting from the parent class.
And you own them as if they're your own, but you really truly get it from a different class. Yep.
Yeah.
Did we see any implementation of overloaded methods last week? Do you guys remember overloaded methods from last week, by the way? Overloaded methods.
Was the scanner, was that an overloaded one? No.
Mm-mm. What are overloaded methods? Scanner is a class. It's not a method. It creates objects.
I don't remember any
It's
instance where we used it, but it's where two methods have the same name but take different parameters.
okay, good. Same name for the method, which takes different parameters. We did see when we wrote JOption pane dot show message dialog, 3 versions of show message dialog showed up on the screen. We picked the first one, but there were 2 others that had the same name but different parameters. That's method overloading. Okay. So you will see a lot of that. In fact, today you will code your own overloaded methods. Every Java instruction ends in what symbol?
Semicolon.
Semicolon.
Mhm. What do you call that semicolon? What got Arnold Schwarzenegger so famous in 80s?
Terminator.
Yes. That's what you call it.
Wow, that's
Terminator.
wow.
You know, he was so advanced, yet he was roaming around with a picture asking, have you seen this child? Okay. Anyway,
That's a great point.
when you are naming a class, the first letter is uppercase for a class name. Do you have to do that? You have to camel case the class, Pascal case the class names?
Yes.
Isn't it just a convention?
Yep, it's just a writing convention. You don't have to do it. Similarly, you do not have to do the camel casing for variable and method names. Is it okay to use keywords as class or method or variable or object names?
No.
No.
Doesn't it stop you from doing that?
Yeah, it will. It will error out. Can I use space in the name of a class, variable, method, or object?
No.
No.
No,
Okay. Does Java let you create a constant?
Yes.
yes,
And how do you differentiate that from variable declaration?
you put const in front of it.
Final.
Final.
Oh, final, sorry. I was going back to C#.
That's okay. It happens. Final. Okay. Final means it's the final version and no other, you cannot change its value during the execution time. That's all it means. Okay, JOption pane is one of the built-in classes we used, and it comes from Java X.Swing package. How many methods of JOption pane did we use in our examples last week? Just give me a number.
2.
2. One was show message dialog that will pop up a dialog box, and the other one was input that allowed you to take an input from user. What is the return type of the input message dialog box?
Null.
What is the return data type? So whatever you put in, what is the return data type?
String.
String. Okay. And if you are putting the value in a non-string primitive type, what do?
Convert it.
Convert it. Okay. To convert from string to primitive types, what do we have in Java?
Parse. Or is it?
We have a special collection of classes. There's a name for that collection. Anybody remember the name of the collection of classes that let you go back and forth between primitive to string and vice versa? Right? Those are called wrapper classes, WRAPPER, wrapper classes. And the wrapper classes let you translate data back and forth. So the parse methods are used by the wrapper classes to parse the data to a respective type. For example, to parse the data from string to double, we will call the double wrapper class, which has a built-in function called parse double to parse string into double. Similarly, integer has parse int. To parse it to a string, it has a toString function or method that will do toString. What is unifying type?
When doing arithmetic, it will choose the best fit for a variable.
Yes, the largest of all the values available in the calculations will be the data type of the resulting value. That's unifying. And how many arithmetic operators does Java has?
3.
4.
Mm-mm.
5.
5. What are they?
Addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and equals.
Equals is not an arithmetic operator.
Oh,
It's an assignment operator.
Modular division.
Modulars, yep.
oh,
Modulus,
okay.
the percentage symbol. Yep, that gives you the remainder after division. That's also an arithmetic operator. Okay, so PEMDAS rules apply in Java. Same stuff, no difference between Java and any other programming language. What is the different? What is, do you guys remember I told you this type narrowing versus type widening? Type narrowing versus type widening? So when you go from a higher area coverage type to a lower area coverage type, that will be type narrowing. That will be an error. For example, if you're putting a double value in a float variable or a float value in an integer variable, that will be narrowing. It will error out. So you have to explicitly cast it. If you're going from a smaller box to a larger variable box, that's type widening. It will automatically cast it, explicitly cast it. Okay. Any questions so far? All good?
Yeah.
Okay. So how about if we now open Eclipse? Let me share my screen here. And let me create our project for today. Chapter 3 project. Make sure you uncheck the create module. And here we have chapter 3.
Sorry, real quick.
Yep.
I went to do a new project. You just says select a wizard. So you just do the Java project.
Yeah, I just went to file new Java project, file new Java project. And then I gave my project a name and make sure I uncheck create module and then hit next and finish.
I just wanted to double check I was doing that right.
It's fine.
Thank you.
Now I will create my very first class inside this project, which I'll call design 1 with a public static void main. Okay, is everybody ready? Can you give me a green check, please? But ready means have come this far.
How do I make the project again?
Okay, you click the file menu,
Okay.
you go new, and then choose Java project. And then you give your project a name. Make sure you uncheck the create module checkbox, and then you can finish. So we're missing checks from Vincent and William. And Christian is working on it, so I know that he's working on it. Any question, Vincent or William?
No, sorry, I have two Zooms open, so. I'll make sure
Oh,
it's-
okay, no problem. Okay, so William and Christian, you can give me a check when you're done. Okay. William, how are we doing there? Do you have any questions? I just don't want to go too far ahead and then somebody says that I'm opening Eclipse. So I just want to make sure everybody's caught up. Okay. Okay. Awesome. Okay. So now here, you guys remember this class system? Dot out, an object out, and Eclipse tells you right away that out, the data type of out is print stream. So it is an object of print stream type, which is declared inside the system class. That's why to get to it, you're coming through the system class, but the actual object's data type is print stream, which is another built-in class, dot. And through that, because out is an object of print stream class, by declaring out object, you can now access the methods inside the print stream. That's why if you notice, all these methods over here, they have the word print stream in the end. That means these methods are coming from print stream class. If you come down, you will see another method called equals. What do you see in the line of equals? Object. And you don't see print stream. And you are like, out is of type print stream. How can it see a method in the object class? Does anybody knows? How is that happening? That an object is seeing a method in a different class? How can an object of one class can see methods in a totally different class and can access them?
Is it being inherited from yet another class?
Exactly. Because object is the parent to all classes in Java. All classes in Java are either direct or indirect children of object. Even if your class, you wrote design one, right? You did not write that it is a child of a class. It automatically becomes child of object. Okay. So out dot print, see print ln is also coming from print stream class. Do you guys see so many print lns over here? There's a whole list of them. What do you call this concept?
Overloaded methods?
Overloaded methods. Very good. Okay. Okay. Yes, Jordan. Okay, so did everybody run this? Let me clear the participants panel so I could see that. Okay, I just cleared the feedback so that when you give me the feedback, I'll have up-to-date feedback. Okay. Okay, that's fine. Is there anything that you guys don't understand in this code that I just wrote? If you look at these outputs, 10 outputs I have, right? These 10 outputs carry 3 different kinds of information. What are those 3 kinds of information, different kinds of information that these 10 lines of output has? If you look at the first 3 lines, the first 3 lines of output is pretty much about college, right? The
Yeah.
next 4 lines are about program. The last 3 are about a course. So those are the 3 different kinds of information that you see in these 10 outputs. This is where modularization comes in, where you need to break your main down into smaller, more controllable modules, which are very cohesive in nature, means the instructions packed inside a module must have a common goal. Otherwise, they don't belong in that module or method. And then you control everything from main. When we create modules, the modules are of 2 types that can be created by Java. Besides value returning and non-value returning, Java has one other way of differentiating between modules. Modules can be static or modules can be non-static. Is main a static module?
Yes.
Yes. And what does the word static means is that a single copy runs for the entire program. So static modules are at the class level. All objects will receive the same copy. If it ever changes, it changes for all objects. So no object can have a personal snapshot of its module. The module stays the same for everybody. In C# class, did you guys go into getters and setters yet?
Yes, we did in advanced micro.
Right, okay. So getters and setters, do they work at the class level or at the object level?
The object level?
Object level. And how can we say that? Because when you call a getter through an object, it will only get the values that object represents. Right?
Yep.
Okay. Those are called non-static in Java. So any module that works at an object level and may have a different value for different objects will work on the object only, will be non-static. And how do you write non-static? You simply drop the word static. We may not get to the non-static methods today, but we will have enough foundations by the end of today's class that when we sail into non-static methods next week, you will have enough background to transition to non-static methods. Does that make sense to you guys? Static versus non-static?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Now let's start writing some static methods, and we will model them after main. Public static void college. I'll copy that and paste it twice. And we're going to see you cannot have two methods with the exact same name and exact same parameters. That's why it's complaining. So I'm going to call the second one department. And now the third one I'll call course. Instead of department, we call it program. Okay. The keyboard shortcut Control-Shift-F. If you remember that from last week, it helps you format the code if it's for any reason not formatted. Control-Shift-F. Oh, let me scroll down so that everybody can get all three methods. Now we will start moving statements. So I'll grab the first three and I will move those in college. I'll grab the next four and move them in program. And I'll grab the last three and I'll move it in course. And again, Control-Shift-F will fix the indentations and everything. So I've modularized the code. Now is the time to call methods from the main. The order in which you call the methods is the order in which they show. You can call the same method or module as many times as you may like. So I'll call college. Then I'll call program. Then I'll call course. Run it, you get the exact same output. No difference. Behind the scene, however, the code is modularized. Okay. Give me a check when you guys are done running it successfully.
For some reason, mine is giving me an error to add a curly brace, but I have the curly brace and it's just not like
Sorry.
seeing it.
Check to see if you have enough curly braces. All the opening ones are closing. So when you click on an opening one, the closing one should have a little rectangle on it. So maybe you're missing a curly brace.
They are all there. So I will, oh, I see. Never
Oh, you-
mind.
oh.
I got it. Sorry.
No problem. Okay. We still are missing checks from a few people. Jonathan and Christian. Okay, Jonathan got it. Christian got it too. Okay. Did you guys understand what I just did here?
Instead of putting them all into the main method, you put them into their own methods that we then called inside the main.
Exactly, exactly. Again, this is something that you guys would have done in Intro to Programming as well. But again, you would have spent the entire class learning about modularization, what we are quickly doing it. But again, you know, for some of you, it might be like, okay, it's understandable, it's easy stuff. Okay, now let's create a module out here called public static void line. Just a bunch of asterisks. We will call the line method in each one of the other methods. Once they're done processing their work, we'll just simply call the line method. So now when you run it, you will see some lines. I mean, like a line of asterisks. Okay. One of the advantages of taking this approach of modularization is if you decide to change the symbol, you can just go to one place and just change the symbol. And now after that, when you rerun it, it will reflect everywhere. So you've modularized your code, and you can call that modularize method however many number of times from whatever method you want to call. So everybody do not need to be called from main. Other modules can also call other modules like a caller. Okay, is everybody caught up with this? Okay, cool. Let's move on to another example here. We're going to call this one employee details. Employee details with a public static void main. In this one, we'll start out with some methods. Public static void info. So notice that I used camel casing in salary info because it had two words. So I camel cased it. Info was one word, so it's all lowercase. Can you guys write the code in the main to call info and then salary info? Let's see if you can complete the code.
Say again, please.
Call info and salary info. So you guys write the code to call these two methods in this order. Why is line 7 an error?
Because it's not static.
Very good.
Oh, mine
See-
wasn't an error. I was confused. I accidentally put static.
So that shows you that if you ever try calling a method and it gives you an error, and you see that the method name matches, the parameter matches, but somehow it is not recognizing, always check to see if the method is static or not, because you are now calling it, treating it like static, and it wasn't static. That's why it was complaining. So a little know-how of the code will help you solve a lot of your error problems. Next thing, what we want to do is we want to call salary info twice. You can do that. You can call it multiple times. However, in this particular context, it is meaningless to call the same information twice. The only time you would do something like this would be, let's say if you're on a phone call and you are connected to the customer, the customer service, and it's an automated customer service where it says, okay, press 9 to hear this again. That's exactly what goes behind the scene. So when you press 9, they call the same method again, which then gives you the same information again. Does that make sense? But that's through options like if condition. So the entire system is built on an if condition, that when you choose option number 1, now you are inside the if condition of option number 1. Then you make another choice. Now you are inside the body of that choice. Then it goes and contacts whatever services needs to contact, comes back, and then gives that information over to the voice service, which then reads that information to you. So it's just a bunch of if conditions with data access. Okay, but here it doesn't really make a difference. So what I want to do is I want to customize my code that every time I call salary info, I could get some variants, some variations. And in order to customize salary information, this is where we use parameters. The whole purpose of parameters is to be able to customize the inside code through the outside values. So I have a salary value and I have a commission value. I have 2 values that can be customized. So right here in the parentheses, I will pass 2 parameters. One is called sal and the other one is called com. So I'm passing 2 parameters. So passing 2 parameters of type double so that we can customize salary and commission for each call. That's why down here, I will use some concatenations. Which will let me display the value of salary and will then let me display the value for commission. Okay, so now that we have a customized call here, and now in this customized call, you will see that lines 7 and 8 are erroring. The reason they're erroring because the call doesn't match. So now here on line number 7, if I write, let's say 56,000, still it doesn't matches because it receives it needs two parameters and I'm only passing one. The moment I decide to pass two parameters, notice it fixes itself. We'll do the same on line number 8. And now when you rerun the program, you will see that each call sends in a different amount. Each call sends in a different amount, so different output gets displayed. Did you guys understand what I just did here? Does that make sense? Or does anybody has any question or needs more clarification? I'm purposely going slow if anybody is wondering, why are we going so slow? Because I want you to understand. Even though you might have learned it from C# perspective, it may not be very different in Java. But still, if you are missing any pieces of information, they'll be easier for you to grasp it and would not be of any problem to you moving forward. That's why I'm going a bit slower. I don't know if you guys think I'm going slower. I don't know. Now that we have received the two parameters, salary and double, we can now work with them and we can do some local calculations. Earlier on, it was not easy to do because the values were hard-coded. Now that we have values inside variables, we could now declare other local variables and perform some computations, such as we'll have a local variable called total, in which we can add both salary and commission. And we can then display the total, which will be different for each call. So that will give you one blank line between the first and the second call. I will add a few more pieces of code here in salary info, which will help us revise some of the stuff we did last week, such as final, rate, sorry, double rate equals to 0.20. Total before deductions. Total deductions is total time rate Oh, hold on a second. Let me do this. Let me take this calculation and put it in a variable. That'll be easier. So that, when I'm taking the difference and calculating my net, I can simply take a difference between total and rate amount. And that'll give me my net. So that way I was able to include addition, multiplication, and subtraction along with constants all in one example as a review of last week. So when you run it, for these extra total, oh, I'm getting these extra zeros. Let me get rid of that. And also here I have the extra zeros. So we have salary, commission, total before deduction, the total deductions, and the difference. Vincent, that 0.0 is because of the double type. Double data type automatically adds 0.0. So did everybody understand what I did here in these lines? Does anybody has any questions about lines 18 through 26? And also the parameter passing and everything. So as I told you guys last week, that every week when we do examples, you will see some of the concepts that we cover in the prior weeks. That way, we will be able to not only revise them, but also we'll be able to see how everything builds on top of each other. Okay. Next, how many different types of information does info displays?
Four.
4. Okay. So let's add 4 string parameters to info. String ID. And remember, you have to repeat the data type with each parameter. Name, string department, DPT, string job. So we have 4 parameters. Let's see if you guys can fix lines 11 through 14. And instead of hard-coded values, concatenate the variables. So lines 11 through 14, display the parameters instead of the hard-coded values. Let's see if you can do it yourself. Oh, all I want you to do is, Aiden, is on lines 11 through 14, instead of these hard-coded values, display the variable names in the appropriate places. And as you guys get done with that, give me a check. A couple people have already given me checks that they are done with this step. So you will do exactly the same thing that we did in the salary info method, that you delete the hard-coded value, and outside the double quotes, you concatenate with the appropriate variable. And that's what you are repeating for each one of the other 3. So anybody who's not yet done, let me give probably a minute or so. So everybody is caught up with this step. Oops, ciao. Okay. Next, we need to fix line number 6, and we need to pass 4 values so that line 6 matches line 10. Can you guys pass 4 values now?
Yes,
That matches the data, that matches the sequence,
yes.
okay? And then after that, test to make sure that it works. Okay. So now when we run it, we can see the name is now customized. We see that salary and commission are also customized. So far, so good, everybody? Okay. Now let's take this to the next step where we start working with value returning functions. So right here, we will call a method public static string input. So the job of this method would be to send in or send back the value that it will input from user. So see all of these different values I have, 1, 2, 3, 4, they're all of type string. If I want to accept that from user in the main method, I would have to write 4 separate inputs. And I would have to store them in 4 separate variables and then process them. How about if I modularize this whole approach, then I wouldn't have to do it 4 times. I could just do it once for every item. So now I will come down here, public static string input. How do you take a console input from user? I'll use the scanner approach. Something we did last week. So guys, how can I fix this error, line number 29?
Hover over the scanner part and select import.
Yep, hover over the scanner and click on import java.util package, the very first line. Okay. Now, why is this input giving me an error? Because I'm missing a return statement, which will return a value. Until and unless I give that, it will start complaining. Okay. So string value equals to in dot next line return value. However, there is one thing very big which is missing in this whole picture, and that is some kind of a message to the user asking what in the world I expect from the user. So enter an ID. For now, enter an ID, you accept an ID, you return an ID back. Let's first complete this code, and we will improve this code in the next few steps. But for now, this is the code that we are looking at. Enter an ID, you accept an ID, you return an ID. Does anybody has any question about lines 30 through 33? Or did you all understand?
Feel like I understood.
It's good.
Okay, now let's scroll up to line number 6. And this is where I am introducing a variable called ID. I'm calling this function down below called input. So call input. It will accept a value from user. It will then return the value which will then be stored in a variable ID. So that's basically what goes behind the scene. Again, I'm writing all these in the comments. It's up to you. If you already understand that stuff, you do not need to. If you already know that stuff from C#, that's okay. So we simply call a function. That function will return a value. It will be stored in a variable ID. So ID will get its value. And now on line number 8, I can delete the double quotes 1, 2, 3, and I can use ID in its place. So basically at this point, I have only customized the first parameter, which is my ID parameter. The rest of the values are going hard-coded. Whenever you are done with these, run it. It will ask you for an ID. Enter some kind of an ID, and when you run the program, that is the ID that you enter will be the employee ID. And this shows that your ID went through without a problem. Okay? Give me a thumbs up whenever, oh, sorry, a check mark when everybody not only complete this, but also understand it, what we did here. If I were to repeat the same process for name, I do string name equals to input. So I call input, input will return a value into the name that I can use in the name. I can do the same for department. And I can use the same for title. However, there is one problem that we have now that needs to be fixed. But let's first take care of this. Before we run it, we'll fix that problem shortly. But for now, I'm just making each one of these parameters customizable, that they will receive their value and will then be used inside the method call. The problem lies not here. There is a logical problem that lies inside the body of the input method. And what is that logical problem? I have the same message appearing every call. Enter an ID, even though I'm accepting a name, even though I'm accepting a title, even though I'm accepting a department. So let's customize the message. String message. So parameters are used for customization. I know the lines above will error out because the parameter mismatch is there, but for now, let's fix this code. So I've made my method customizable through a parameter. And that parameter will control by telling the user, what is it that I want you to enter now? Okay. Now let's go up into each one of these calls and write our custom message. Enter an ID. Enter a name. Enter department name. Enter job title. So we have customized the message. Now, when you run the program, it will ask, enter an ID, you enter an ID, enter a name, enter a department name, enter a job title, and it displays the rest of the information. Yes. Francisco raised a very good question. Let me address that question now. I didn't want to address it before. Here we go. We're passing ID in an ID. We're passing name in the name. We're passing department in the department. Francisco is saying, why are you passing title in the job? Shouldn't it be job in both places or title in both places? The answer to your question is no. The reason is because in parameter passing, names don't have to match. That's why I purposely did that, so that you can see that some names are same for parameters, some are different, because these are called pass by value. Only the value of title will be passed into job. As long as their data types are compatible, the values will pass. Names are not important. And that's true for C# as well. Does that answer your question, Francisco? Okay. So behind the scene, in computer's memory, it simply grabs a value from one variable's memory and pastes it in another variable's memory. Robert, are you caught up with the code down below? And Aiden, you too?
Yep, I'm good.
Okay. As long as, yep, as long as they're in this. Now, the thing is this, that in this example, they're all string. If you change their spots around, the code will give you a logical error, because ID will come in place of name, name will come in place of job, job may come in place of department. So that would be a logical error, because they're all string. So it will be programmer's job to make sure that the passing and receiving parameters match. By the way, do you guys know what the passing parameters are actually called in programming? The passing parameters, the line number 11, are called actual parameters. And these are called formal parameters, the receiving ones. So these are passing parameters. And these are receiving parameters. I hope I didn't lose anybody and you're still getting it, understanding what we're doing, even though the example is growing in size and complexity. So don't hesitate to ask if you do not understand any of these things. I'll be more than glad to go over and explain. Yeah. Now that you are done with this step, let me introduce two more variables. Double salary equals to input, enter salary. Double commission equals to input, enter commission. Why is line 12 an error?
Because we have salary and com essentially hard coded in the salary info.
Mm-mm.
Because it's a string. Input is a string.
Input returns something of type string, and salary and commission are both double. So if you hover over the error, what does the error reads?
It's a type mismatch, so
Yep.
we'd have to convert it.
Exactly. And remember, that's where your wrapper classes come in. How can I fix line 12? The same way line 13 will be fixed. Can anyone of you help? To fix
Double dot parse.
double?
Parse double.
Very good. And we will repeat the same on line number 12. Oops. Oh, we'll repeat the same on line 13, I mean. Oh, I forgot input out. I left input out. Okay, that's complete. Okay. We're calling the input, passing a message. Input will receive the message, accept the value, send the value back, and then the value will be converted to double. So let me write it out here in words. Okay. So you call input with a message. Input accepts a value of type string from user and returns it to lines below. Since receiving variable is of type double, we need to convert from string to double using wrapper classes. Since I'm accepting, then displaying, then accepting, then displaying, let me move all the variables in one place so that first I accept all the values. Let me move these comments over here as well. Then I will display by calling both display methods. That way my accepting logic, input logic will be in one place and all my display logic will come after. Did everybody get this to work?
I'm still working on it.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, I got it.
Does anybody has any question? Then we will take a break here till 7:55. And then we will resume at 7:55. What we need to do next is we will do probably one more example with some value returning, and then we will jump into object-oriented programming. And we'll start building classes, bring in properties, getters, setters, and you can then start seeing the differences because you recently learned with Alan. Was it yesterday? Getters and setters, or was it last week?
I had him for the first time yesterday.
Okay, so you will get to see how it is done in Java, and then you can Okay, so remind me to resume the recording. I'm pausing it right now. Okay. So before we went on break, we started to look into value returning and non-value returning functions or methods. So this was the example that we worked with called employee details. We had an info method, which was customized, where we passed 4 parameters. We used those 4 parameters to display the values. We also had another method called salary info. We customized by passing 2 values, and then we displayed them. We did some calculations and the whole 9 yards. And then we had a value returning function called input, in which we also passed a custom message so that it can accept different kinds of values with different messages, and then we'll be able to return that value. Okay. Now let's see how we can shrink some of this code. For example, let's start out with the input method. The input method has 1 variable value. What is the purpose of that variable? Or I shouldn't say variable, object value. What's the purpose of value?
To prompt and allow the user to input string.
And then
Assign it to the string variable that you declared, so like name or ID or department.
but that's not value's job. The value's job is only to accept a value and return. That's it. Hold the value and return it. That's all it is doing. So really, it is only there for 1 instruction. Correct? Is it possible to write this code without value, the bottom piece? Can I eliminate value altogether and still have everything running? I'm talking about these 2 lines down below, lines 47 and 48. Is it possible to eliminate value and still do the same thing?
Could you just return in dot next line?
Yep. You can simply just return in dot next line. Okay, and let me explain to you what exactly will happen here. Line number 46 will display a message. And that message will be whatever message it holds. Then this is how the line number 47 will function. The prompt will accept an input from the user in the stream and will redirect the stream to the return. Return will simply forward it to the receiving variable. So you don't really need value. It is unnecessary memory allocation. You can simply grab the incoming stream and return it to the receiver. Does that make sense? So, what do you guys think? Did you understand what's going on here?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I'm not too sure still.
Okay. So what we were doing before was we were grabbing the value from the user and we were packing it into another variable called value.
Okay.
And then we will returning that variable to the recipient. Now what we're doing is, as the value comes in through in.next line, instead of first holding it in a variable and then returning that variable, we are directly returning it as the value arrives.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense. Thank you.
So we are saving ourselves from having to allocate memory for one instruction only. So now let's go back here to line number 6. Input makes a call, value comes, name makes a call, department makes a call, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now, what I'm about to get into may make it slightly more complicated. If you look at line number 17, what is the purpose of ID? Line number 6 accepts the incoming value, held is inside ID, hold the value inside ID. Line number 17 uses ID and passes it over, correct? That's what we are doing with ID. Is
Yep.
ID used anywhere after line 17? Within main?
No,
No. Does ID has any other reference after line 6 before line 17?
No.
No. So even in this case, you could simply copy this input, enter an ID thing, and you can replace ID with it. And you can comment out line number 6. Now, let me explain to you what will going to happen here. The code gets a little bit complicated here. On line 17, you make a call to input. So info is called, but before the call completes, one of the parameter is also a call. So the first parameter of info makes a call to input, passes the string enter an ID to it. Input receives enter an ID in MSG, displays that message to the user. Whatever value comes in to line 47 gets passed to line number 17, and this area will then be replaced by that value. So you don't really need a placeholder. You do not really need a variable to hold the value and then pass it. You can simply receive it and pass it over, receive it and pass it over. Do you get that piece?
Yep.
Anybody has any question about this one?
So, okay. So just to be sure,
Mhm.
in info,
Mhm.
it's going to display whatever ID is. And in place of ID, because we have it set up in the public static void main info string ID, it's going to call it with input as it's being called to display.
So this is basically what was happening before,
Okay.
that we were accepting a value from user, we were holding inside a variable ID, then we were passing that value or copying and pasting it from line 17 to line 22. We were just copy pasting the value from there.
Okay, so that's
So what-
happening at the same time.
So it is working exactly the same way. The only difference is on line number 17 now, there is no named memory. It's just an unnamed memory because it's only used for one copy paste operation. So you don't have to name that memory.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay. Now we can do exactly the same stuff with the other the other 3 guys. You can just simply copy the input method call replace name. I'll move the comment to the line above because this line will get longer. Then we're gonna grab this and we're gonna paste this over here. We're gonna grab this and we'll paste it over here, okay? And all these lines I can comment out. I'm leaving it behind so that you have it for your reference in your code. However, those lines could easily go out the window and your program will work exactly the same way. Let's test this. So it'll ask for, oops, here you go. 1 second. Hold on a second. Why is it jumping to salary? Hold on a second. Oh, because of those are nested and those are open-ended. Okay. So once I will going to fix those bottom ones as well. So I'll grab this, copy this, replace that, copy this, and replace that. So all those declarations are now gone. That's the only difference we have from the previous one, because now as we called info, it is displaying it right away.
I have an error that I'm unsure about.
Which line? 17 or 18?
18.
Okay, check to see if you have everything, all the parentheses and everything in place. And after you check to make sure that it is in place, hover over to see what is the error message.
The error is on the parse double, and it says the method parse double and the type double is not applicable for the arguments.
Maybe let's see how your arguments are. Can you share your screen?
Yes.
Oh, you're missing one parentheses after the
Am I?
double quotes of salary. See, enter salary. You have one parenthesis that closes input. You need another one
Lord.
to close parse double, and you need to do the same at the end of line 20. You need a closing parentheses for salary info call. Yep, that's it.
Okay, my bad.
Okay.
Thank you.
So again, this was only for shortening the code where you do not need to necessarily have a variable in place. You do not need to. You can just simply have a stream. Yep, Mason, you will generally not see it in the books. You will generally not see it in the teaching environments. This is something you will see industry programmers do, where they nest things. Your code may look a bit complicated, but the whole idea is to not use memory when not needed. To make it a little bit more memory efficient code. So that's why I introduced that. Your book doesn't has any example on that topic. Okay. Okay. Cool. Okay. Vincent, did you get it?
Yeah, I got it. Thank you.
Okay, cool. How about the rest of you? Everybody's okay? Okay, so what I just introduced to you guys was something extra. You don't need to fully have a good grasp on it at this stage, but just so that you are exposed to it. If you ever see it, you know what's going on. Okay. So now let's create our next class as we dive into object-oriented programming. So as I told you last week, that whenever you create a class, it's a generic idea of the object that you are trying to write the code about. So let's say if I want to write the code about an object such as microphone. So I am creating a class called microphone. That's the name of my class, with a public static void main. And we will hit finish. Okay. Now, after that, I need to start thinking about properties of a microphone. I'll list those properties. For example, to keep it simple, I'm going to just call it brand, model, and price. Those are the three properties that I will create. So again, these are all created outside the main. These are all generic properties. So I have a public property called brand, a public property called model, and a public property called price. Okay. Now, when we create a class, we need to have these properties initialized to some initial value. To initialize class properties to an initial value, we create a constructor. That's the whole point of a constructor. So when we create constructor, we can initialize brand, model, and price. So constructor is a method to initialize the properties. Just remember, that's the only purpose and the whole reason for the existence of a constructor. So anytime I create an object of microphone type, automatically all the objects will be Shure, GLX D24, and 599.99. Until and unless I decide to change those specs with other specs. So to change, oops, wrong place. To change class, oh sorry, to change property values, we use setters called mutators to retrieve property values. We use getters, which are called accessors. Okay. Do you guys understand all of this, whatever I wrote this far, or the comments that I wrote? Okay. In C#, you create a property. Inside that property, you write your getter and setter, correct? That's how you do it. Okay. In Java, you do not do it that way. In Java, you create two separate methods. One is a setter method and one is a getter method. They're not tied to any property. These are properties. In C#, you differentiate between attributes or fields, right? Fields, properties, and getter setters. In Java, attribute and property is the same thing. We don't differentiate between them. And if a getter gets you a value of a property, it belongs to that property. If a setter helps you change the value of a property, it belongs to that property. So you don't really pack things inside an additional layer called property. So you don't have that additional layer in Java. So if I were to create a setter for brand, I will create a non-static. Remember, static is for the class, non-static is for the object. So I'll create a non-static method called public void set brand. It will receive a parameter and I will assign that parameter to brand. That's basically how you will write your setter. This is the setter for the property brand or the attribute brand. Similarly, if I want to write a setter for model, I will just copy this and paste it and create another method called set model. And then I'll have my model equals to M. Similarly, if I need one for price, so like that, you will have one setter for each property. Now comes the getter, exactly the same way. Since my brand returns it's of type string, therefore this method will say get brand and will return a value of type string. Does all this make sense to you guys?
Yep.
So unlike C#, in Java, you have to write separate setter methods and separate getter methods. And if you can see, once you understand how to write one setter, they're all modeled very similarly. What will be different between each one of them will be that you will give them different names, and their parameter types will reflect the type of the property they're setting. Getters are also modeled the same way. Their return type will vary based on the property that they're returning. Does anybody has any question about this before I move further to the main? Okay. Now let's go to the main. Create a mic instance. This is how we create a mic instance modeled after the scanner class, remember? So we write the name of the class followed by the name of the instance equals to new constructor. So that's the model. Class name, instance name, new constructor. That is the syntax on which line 43 or all lines pertaining to any kind of object whatsoever that you will create. Now comes, let's start pulling in the default values. Okay, so let's display the object mic1. Microphone brand. Mic1. Okay. Remember when we created the scanner object? If I were to accept an input from user, what did I write? The name of the object dot. Next line. So I call the method from an object. Similarly over here, I need to display a value. So I call mic1 dot. As soon as I put the letter G, notice all the getters show up. Notice two of the getters are coming from object class. Why? The reason I told you earlier today, that all the classes are children of object. Even if you don't make a distinction like they are, it automatically does it for you. However, the three getters are coming from the local. So we just do that, choose one of the three, copy, paste, mic model, and mic price. Mic1 dot get model, mic1 dot get price. And let's run it. And here's your output. Does anybody has any questions so far? Now let's start changing the values. So change the mic1 attribute values. How do you, what do you think? How will I change the attributes?
Using the setter
Yep.
method.
Yep. So then I am checking to make sure that the values have changed. So I displayed the original values. I changed the values, and then I'm redisplaying to make sure that the values have changed. So anytime you need to grab a value, you call a getter. Anytime you need to change a value, you call a setter. So can I just change one attribute, or do I have to change all three if I'm changing?
You could change just one.
Yep. So let's say if I only want to change the model. So let's say, well, and model and the price, of course, because it'll be a different model. So it'll be a different price. So I will check to make sure that only those two attributes have changed. It's a Newman mic. Oh, I think I misspelled Newman. This is N-E-U-M-A-N-N, Newman. Yeah, Jordan, that's expensive. There's even one more expensive, which is U67. That's over $7,000.
Is that the one you use?
No.
That's crazy. I've got an Audio Technica, and it's way cheaper than even the Shure.
Mine's the Blue Yeti.
That's even cheaper than Audio Technica, and they all sound fairly similar, honestly.
Well, to
I mean,
us.
for talking wise, I mean, like if you're doing like singing and podcasts.
Yeah. For podcasts, these are decent. I mean, like, $100, $150 is okay for a podcast. I mean,
Yeah.
most of these have built-in filters in them, pop filters. But I mean, they can always use an external one.
Yeah, I was looking at that Shure one today, actually. Not to get it. That's too much for a microphone for me. But
yeah, I use HyperX.
okay, that's a good brand too. I got the Audio Technica headphones, and so I went to go get a microphone. I was like, I like those. Let me try that.
I can't wear headphones.
Really?
I can't. I mean,
Just hurt your ears?
It just makes me uncomfortable up here. So it just,
Oh yeah, fair enough.
yeah. So it just, exerts a lot of pressure on, so I can't really wear headphones.
Right.
Head oversets are okay. I mean, like, they just have the mic piece. Yeah. Okay. So if everybody's okay with this example, let's do one more example, just so that we can understand the concept a little bit more. Repetition helps. So can we move on to the next one? Is everybody okay with this one? Okay,
I
so,
just need a few more minutes.
oh, sure, that's fine. I hope you're not typing everything because I copy pasted a lot of this stuff.
Now I'm copy pasting as well.
Oh, okay, okay. Cool. Just thought I'll ask because I've had students in the past who just typed everything.
I do have a question. In the set portion, why do we have to give like brand equal to B and model equal to M? Why do we have to give them that?
Okay, so because B, M, and P are the names of the parameters which allow us to change the values of the properties, so we simply assign the parameter to the property so that we can change its existing value to whatever value we pass. So when we call set brand and we passed Newman, the Newman went into B, and it was B that we assigned to brand. So that's how we were able to change the brand's value from Shore to Newman.
Okay, got it.
The names of the parameters could be anything.
Okay, I'm all set.
Okay. Let's create our next class. We're going to call this one computer with a public static void main. Public string brand and public double price. I'm just using two properties. Brand, oops. Brand equals to HP and price equals to 700. And remember, in a given setter, you only write for one property, one getter for each property and one setter for each property, okay? Let's see if you can write, if you guys can code the setters and getters. Okay, code the getters and setters. We'll give a few more minutes till everybody can give me a check to see that they're done with getters and setters. And those of you who are done with getters and setters, instantiate an instance of computer type and display the default values, then change the default values and display the changed values. So for anybody who is done with setters and getters, see if you can code the main. Does anybody has any questions about this thing? A lot of this was sort of a revision of the last example. So the people who did not give me the checks, are you still coding?
I am.
Okay. Okay, Mason, let me know if you have any questions.
I'm getting an error for when we change the second set.
Are you talking about line 35?
Yeah, 35 and 36, both set brand and set price are giving me an error.
Okay, can you double check your set price and set brand with mine? Do you have parameters? Do you have them as void? Are you assigning the parameter to the property?
Void. I am.
Okay, what does the error message says when you hover over? What does it read?
The method set brand string is undefined for the type computer.
Okay, so if you scroll up, did you make sure that you did not use the word static?
Nope, I have void there.
Okay, and does the spelling and the case matches?
It looks like it, yeah.
Okay, then let's have a look at it. Okay. Okay, here's the problem. Line number 13. You called it get brand instead of set brand. line 13,
Oh, okay.
and also
Yeah, the one below it.
mhm. Okay, cool. That should be care of.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Mhm.
I'm not sure what my problem is.
Okay, is it an error? Or
Please.
is it?
No, it looks like it's a logic error.
Okay, let's have a look at your code. Okay, so can you please scroll up for me? Okay, just, okay. The spelling of computer on line number 7, computer.
Ah.
Okay, that's it. That's why, you know, everything is oh, you need to get rid of void. Constructors don't have void. Yeah. Oh, your microphone has errors. Do you want me to help you fix those? Go ahead, proceed with this one, proceed. Okay, this one works. Now go to your microphone one.
I hadn't actually finished this one yet. I had taken a screenshot. I was going to finish it up later.
Oh, okay, so you have, okay, sure, that's fine. Okay. Now that's a very interesting thing that showed up on the screen here, that he misspelled the word computer as computer and created as a void method. So it thought there's an extra method in the class. But that raises a question. When he did not even write the constructor, how in the world his program actually ran? The answer to that question is, when you do not write a constructor, the Java compiler will write one for you. However, all the properties will get the default data type values. That's why his brand came out to be null and his price came out to be 0.0. So without constructor, you cannot have a class. Why? Because everybody calls the constructor when they're instantiating. So if you don't write one, the system will write one for you. But the one the system writes is so basic. That's why you want to write your own and initialize it with the values of your own, rather than relying on the default values. Okay. Anybody else still working on this? Vincent, Josh, Aiden, Christian. Aiden, you want to show yours or your? Okay, go ahead. Share your screen. Scroll down a little bit. Okay, now on line number 19, it should be price equals to P. Okay, because you have a parameter coming in, and then also on line 15, the variable B should not be in double quotes. Otherwise, it will only get B as a value as you're receiving. We want to get the value of the B variable and assign it to brand. Okay. So now run it and let's make sure that it works. And it does. Cool. Nice. Okay. Now, guys, let's make a few other changes. So let's go up to set brand. Now I'm getting you more closer to how Java developers write the setters. The first thing I told you was to name the parameter different from the property, but Java developers don't do that. They give the parameter the exact same name as the property. So first fix that. Java developers, to minimize, this is just a writing convention again, to minimize the names in the setter, the parameter name will match exactly with the attribute name. But now comes the question, then how in the world will my setter know which one of the two is a property and which one of the two is a parameter? Answer is very simple. The one that is a parameter, the one that is a property, you precede it with the word this. I'll explain you this in just a minute. And notice it got its blue color back. So it knows this is the property and this is the parameter. Okay, so first understand that much, then I'll explain you what is this. So first we made sure the names of the parameter match the name of the attribute. Then the attribute name was preceded with the word this. This is actually an object reference. An object reference. Is everybody done with the change? I can explain it then. Now let's scroll down for the explanation. On line number 34, when I made a call to set brand, who made a call to set brand? Did I call it directly or did I call it through an instance? On line 34, did I call the set brand directly or did I call it through an instance?
An instance.
Instance.
Okay. So now when I made a call through the instance, this represents that instance in the body of the set brand. So this means the caller instance. That's why when the value of brand comes in, it only replaces the brand for that one particular instance. Let's put this to test. Let me introduce another instance here called com2. So we have a com1 and now we have a com2, two of them. So com1, I'm setting, let's set com2 to Dell also, instead of Dell, let's do Lenovo. And we're gonna make this maybe like 95222. So just like we're displaying comp1, we will display comp2. So all I did was introduce another instance, call setters. Oh, I'm gonna change this to comp2. Okay, so as I'm changing comp1, I'm also changing comp2. As I'm displaying comp1, I'm also displaying comp2 after the change. Run it. And now I will explain to you once, I'll just give a couple minutes to everybody so that everybody is done, then I'll explain the code.
Have we used the get method yet?
Get.
Yeah.
Yes, all of these are gets. See?
Oh, okay. Okay.
You cannot receive the value without the getter. Okay, so let me explain it to you what's going on behind the scene. On line number 30, what you see is that an object called comp1 is created with two slots inside the memory of comp1. One slot is for the brand, the other slot is for the price. On the next line, comp2, that's another memory allocated with two slots, one for the brand and one for the price. On line number 35 and 36, you're telling the setter that I am calling on behalf of comp1. So that's what this represents inside the setter. That the memory allocated for brand for comp1, I want to put the value del in it. And then the memory allocated inside the comp1 for price, I want to put 452.22 on it. So that this in both of the calls is working on behalf of comp1. The calls are over. Then you recall the set brand on line 37, but this time on behalf of comp2. So now the set brand is working on behalf of comp2 and is replacing the brand value with Lenovo for comp2 on the next line, replacing the price value for comp2 for 952.22. So that's why we say the non-static methods work at instance level and static methods work at class level. That's why after changing both objects, when we displayed the values, notice comp2 Lenovo did not override the comp1 Dell because Dell and 452 are inside the comp1 memory. So anytime you call the getter on comp1, you will get Dell and 452. Anytime you call get brand and get price on comp2, you will get Lenovo and 952. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So each instance maintain its own memory, and the size of that memory is dependent on the properties of the class that you allocate in the constructor. So constructor defines pretty much what will be the size of each instance. Using the setter, you're simply changing the values in those slots. Using the getter, you're simply pulling out the values from those slots. That's all there is to a class. If you understand this, you pretty much understood almost all classes that exist. The class will probably, what will happen is the class will get maybe like 50 properties, 50 getters, 50 setters, you know. But if you understand the concept, that's all there is to it. Every property needs a getter and a setter, setter to change the value, getter to get the value, and all these getters and setters are tied to an instance. You cannot directly call them. Is everybody okay with that concept? Then I'll move on to the next concept.
Yep.
Okay. Is it possible for you to have a property with no getter, just the setter?
Yes.
Yes. And why would you want to do that?
So that you could maybe get user input and set it that way.
But wouldn't you want to retrieve that input as well?
I suppose so. So would it be if it was like I don't know. Sorry.
A property with a setter only and no getter is generally used when the property is used to feed in the value, but the property's value is not part of the output. It could be an intermediary calculations. It could be something coming in from one place and being fed into another. You are using it as an intermediate process, but it is not part of the final output. That way, you will have a property that nobody can retrieve, yet it will be used behind the scene. And the contrary would be that a property to which you want to block the setting. You know, there's a property that gets calculated only by your coding mechanism. You want to take away the feature that somebody can change it, then don't write the setter for that property. Nobody can change it then. They can only retrieve it if you only write the getter. Okay? Everybody's cool with that?
Yep, that makes sense.
Okay. Now, let's move on to the next thing. If you scroll down, we see a lot of repetition. Line number 32, 33 are doing exactly the same thing as 39, 40. And line number 41 and 42 are doing very similar stuff as the other four. So if I had like 5 objects, I would have to write the same stuff 10 times. To avoid that, I will create a method. That's what the methods are for. A method, a static method to display object properties. So I'll have a public, static void display. Now here comes the question. How will I know if I'm displaying comp 1 or comp 2? Very easy. Just like main can receive an argument of the type string, very well, your method can also receive an object of type computer. Just like you can pass parameters of primitive types, you can pass parameters of string type, you can pass parameters of user-defined class types. So now once that is settled, I will just copy paste these 2 lines and drop the word 1. Okay. So what I'm doing is my local object is called comp. Doesn't matter. I can pass comp 1 into it. It will be received by comp. And then comp will get the memory location of comp 1. So when comp calls get brand, he can see the brand's value of comp 1. When comp calls get price, he can see the price value of comp 1. When the call to display is over, in the next call, whoever calls display, display can then peek into that guy's memory because you are passing that guy as a parameter. So now let me get rid of these 2 lines and replace it with a display and pass comp 1 as a parameter. We'll do the same here and something very similar down here, but replace it to comp. And notice your main is a lot cleaner because all you're doing is making calls to display and passing the object. and it is displaying the values for you. Does that make sense to all of you?
Yeah.
Now in your books, in your book, if you turn to page 155, there is an example, but prior to looking at 155, I want you to look at 142, page 142. Is it 142? Hold on a second. It's, yeah, 142, right at the top of page 142. First, check this out. And do you understand this, the whole thing? What is the figure 325 I'm talking about?
It's basically what we just did, right?
Yeah, something very similar to that we just did. It just has maybe different properties, might be different names, but similar idea, same idea or other. I just wanted to make sure that, you know, seeing another example, do you understand what's going on?
Okay.
It just like has multiple setters and multiple getters. So far in this example, the author did not use that this thing I showed you. I think she has it in the next chapter, if I'm not wrong, but I just went ahead and covered that topic from the next chapter while we are on the subject. So did everybody had a chance to go over the class? Any question about this class, the properties, the getters? She did not even code the constructor. Then turn to page 155. What's different about page 155, again, right at the top of page 155, what she did different was she created another class. It is quite possible that you don't have to have the main in the same class. You can create another class with the main, and then you can call the instance of the first of a class outside. So she's creating an instance of employee, and then she's calling get employee data to instantiate the instance, fill it up with values, return that object to this line, and that will be assigned to my employee. So she is using the value returning for objects. So she's declaring a local object, populating that object with all the setters, then returning that object to line where it says my employee equals to get employee data, and then assigning that object to my employee. So now my employee will be filled with the data coming in from temp.emp. Temp.emp data will be copied over to my employee. So when you call display employee and you pass my employee into an EMP, all the getters will then display the value that you entered. So she's just taking that little bit of a complicated approach to doing what we just did. Once you guys are done looking at this, then go to the Blackboard under this week's button and look at your assignment number 2. And let me know if you have any question about assignment number 2.
Looks good to me.
All good here too.
I know.
So for these assignments, do you want us to use the methods that you showed us today? Like, for example, in the computer class, we have the display and then comp. We kind of like make it easier to read in the main project. Rather than like the microphone program. Although that's weird, I can't hear you.
Yeah, we can't hear you.
Oh, I thought it was just me. Okay.
Oh, okay, yeah. So microphone was a step 1
Okay.
and computer is a step 2. So the assignment should draft by computer 2
Okay.
because, you know, it's more refined than microphone was.
Okay. All right, that makes sense. Thank you.
And I've just given you a sample output just so that you know how the output will look like. You don't have to feed with exact same values. Because somebody just, somebody emailed me asking if I have to use exact same values. No, it's a sample output just so that you can see how your output will look like. So how was today's class, guys?
Informational.
It's
Lot of
good, but I'm
stuff.
very tired.
I hope it was a good learning experience.
It was. I definitely feel
Yeah, it
like
was good.
I understood
Definitely
what you
was.
said.
So the idea is that you guys understand